So here we are. These are all the ingredients that we will be using to make this home brew today. This might quite possibly be the easiest home brew that you have ever made. My name is Drew. I'm a home brewer. I like to make really quick, simple beers at home, and I especially like small batches. When you start home brewing and you really start diving into it and researching it, it can get really complicated, really fast, and that can be a little bit discouraging. So right now, let's make a really tasty beer really easily at home, and we'll do this in just a couple of hours. So for this is called a smash beer. It's a single malt and single hop. Today we're going to be making a Belgian style white ale. And for that, I have actually my malt extract here. You can use a different malt extract if you want. I am using sorghum. This is actually gluten-free, but I will post the links in the description of this video if you want to use a substitute for this that's not gluten-free. Then for our additions here, we've got lime peel. Traditionally for a Belgian style white ale, you would use orange peel. I've done that already, so I want to use lime peel today. We're going to be using a Belgian style ale yeast, and then Tettnang hops. These are a low alpha acid hop. Play with a different hop variety if you want, but basically these are the 4 ingredients that we will be using. A malt, we've got one adjunct with the lime peel, we've got the yeast, and we've got the hops. We're going to keep it really simple. So for my ratios, I like to use a 1-to-1, and I use that term a little loosely, and you'll see what I mean. Basically, for every pound of malt extract, I use 1 gallon of water. This is 3.3 pounds, so I'm going to be using 3 gallons of water. I'm not getting overly complicated and specific with it, so about 1-to-1 ratio. Don't beat yourself up worrying about the ratios too much. You don't want them to be wildly off, but a 1-to-1 ratio has worked really well for me when it comes to how much malt extract to how much water you need. So basically behind me, I've got a 4-gallon pot here on the stove. I've got 3 gallons of water in it. It's getting pretty close to my boil here, so it's about time to pitch this malt in there. And then what I want to show upcoming later is how I go ahead and carbonate this. I will be force carbonating this home brew, and I'll actually be using this mini keg you can see back here. So if you'd like to subscribe or just be sure to check back in a couple of weeks, I will be showing how I will be force carbonating this using a mini keg at home. I don't have a huge space, so I like to make these small batches, and it's really convenient for me and my home brewing. Plus, it doesn't make a mess, and it doesn't take my whole day. This is really just going to take a couple of hours. So we're pretty close, so we'll check back in when it is time to go ahead and add our malt to the water. So it's time to pour this in. I've got a spoon to help me scrape it out, so let's go ahead and pour our malt in the water. Okay, basically, we just need to take off the lid here. Open up our malt. Now this malt is really sticky, so I try not to get it on my fingers too much. There we go. Nice. I'll take my spoon here. So I'm right-handed, but I'm going to do this for your benefit here. Just scrape it off the sides here. And just make sure to get all that syrup in there. What I like to do is take a little spoonful here, a couple spoonfuls, and pour it back in here. Always use your best judgment when you're pouring hot water into a plastic container, but I try to loosen up some of the syrup to get it out here. Cool. So there you have it. We'll kind of get it inspired to stir up a little bit. Now you want to be careful with this. Basically what can happen is you can get what's called a boil over. When you add all of that sugar in here, and see how it's starting to foam up here at the top? It doesn't happen as much with this gluten-free sorghum, but what can happen is once it gets to that boiling area, this can really bubble up and start to boil over. So you want to watch your temperature, and then you also could have a spray bottle handy with some cold water to spray it down as it overboils, and then be ready to remove this from the heat when necessary. Cool, so I've got my malt added. You see it's coming up to a nice rolling boil here. I'm basically just gonna stir it and keep an eye on it and make sure it doesn't boil over like this. See how it's starting to get aggressive? So I'm controlling the heat here. I'm gonna take it off the heat just for a second because I do not want to have a boil over, basically sugar water all over the top of my stove here. So we'll come back to the stove here, control the heat. See how it immediately starts boiling again as soon as it hits that. And then basically I'm just going to turn it down to a lower temperature and get it to a nice rolling boil. Nice. So again, we're at a nice rolling boil. Everything's controlled. It's been about 10 minutes. I'm ready to add my first addition of hops and lime peel. So basically I'm just going to add this whole ounce. Really, you can do this however you want, but I'm going to do half of it now and then half of it right at flame out for the last 15 minutes to give it that nice fresh hop flavor at the end. So I've got my hop bag and then I've got my lime peel here. So basically let's go ahead and cut this open and then we will be adding everything else. So you can do this however you want. I'm just going to cut open the bag and I'm going to eyeball it. Really, you can get as technical as you want and start weighing the stuff out, but ultimately I'm going to be adding this whole ounce, so I'm just doing half now and half later. Give it a good smell there. Ah, it smells so good. So that's about half in the bag. And then for my lime peel, I'm just going to be using a tablespoon. So, smells like lime. It's that simple. Just a tablespoon there, right into the bag. And at this point, I'm going to turn it up a little bit because it seemed to calm down quite a bit. And then for putting the bag in, I just dip in the corner a little bit and get it wet as it goes and keep going until it is completely submerged and it wants to sink to the bottom. Now again, when you start adding stuff to the beer, it can have a tendency to want to boil over again, so be ready to control the temperature and everything at this point as well. And then for the bag here, I just wrap it around the handle, and that is enough to keep it in place while this is boiling. So this is going to be a 45-minute boil. And then, so 45 minutes, we'll go ahead and check back in. And you just want to keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't boil over here. So, all right. So we're 30 minutes in. We've got basically 15 more minutes. So let's go ahead and add our remaining hops here and then a little bit more lime peel. So basically, we just have to fish out our bag here and add some more. Okay, so let's go ahead and get our bag out a little bit here so we can go ahead and add some more. So you see the string got all twisted up here, which is fine. Let's go ahead and loosen that up a little bit. And then I'm just going to use my spoon here to kind of pry it open a little. It's pretty toasty, but it's all right. So there we go. Basically just going to open our bag and get the remaining hops in there. And then also we're going to do another tablespoon of the lime peel. There we go, voila. And then I wrap it around the handle here. And actually what I did is I grabbed a clip here from the fridge and you can wrap the string around and then basically just clip it to itself, and that gives it a secure hold there on the edge of the pot. So we got 15 minutes left, like I said. So let's go ahead and get the fermenter prepped and get everything kind of sanitized and ready. However, this still has to cool down for a long time, so you don't have to do this immediately, but I'm just trying to utilize my time while I've got that boiling. So basically in the sink here, I've got my sanitizing solution all set up in my fermenter. That's all ready to rock. Basically just want to make sure that everything is nice and sanitized. I'm splashing this on the lid here. And then I want to show you some of my other supplies here. Basically, this is my little brew box here. Every brewer or home brew enthusiast should have one of these. I've got airlocks, I've got additions, I've got calcium, all of my little water treatment things. I've got yeast nutrient here. I've got my refractometers and my hydrometers to measure the amount of sugar. So I've got all my good stuff here. This is just a thermometer here. So basically I've got all my good stuff here in this tote that I can keep everything organized when I'm brewing beer at home. And then I've got a larger tote in the garage that I keep everything in. So it's a good way to keep everything organized. But basically for the beer today, all we're going to need is this airlock. So I'm going to get this into our sanitizing solution here to be sanitizing as well. But once we're done with the beer, we're going to pitch it into here, and then we're going to pop the airlock in here and let it ferment for 2 weeks. So let's go ahead and just get that airlock in there so everything can get nice and sanitized in our Star San sanitizer here. So we'll get to that in a little bit, but basically 15 minutes here, then I'll turn off the flame. I'll let that cool down, and then we'll pitch it. There we go. We are pretty much all but done. We can go ahead and turn off the heat. I am just gonna slide it over just like that. Now remember, this is the easy way to make homebrew. This is not the traditional or typical way. So what people might do at this point is put this in an ice bath. So you'd fill up the sink with cold water, and you'd put this in an ice bath, and you'd circulate the water around to cool it down to the yeast pitching temperature. However, to make this easy, I'm just gonna let this sit on the stovetop until it's cooled down to about 70 degrees, at which point we will dump it, pitch it into the fermenter, put the yeast in, leave it alone for 2 weeks. So we'll be back when it's cooled down to about 70 degrees. Nice, so we are ready here. It has been a better part of a day, and this is cooled down, it's cooled to the touch. The only thing that I did that I didn't show on camera was I pulled the bag out of the kettle there, and I put it in a bowl. So now we just need to pour this in the fermenter and get everything set up for that. So let's go ahead and prep for that. I've got everything in my fermenter sanitizing, but I want to save my sanitizing solution, so I've got another pot here. I'm just going to pour this out into the pot. Now this is no rinse sanitizing solution, so you don't have to rinse it off. All right, and that just keeps my sanitizing solution there because I will still need some of that. And now I'm just picking up my kettle here, and I am going to pour it right into my fermenter. There's our fermenter full now. Let's go ahead and pitch the yeast. Again, this is the Belgian style ale yeast. And first thing I do is I dump it or dip it in my sanitizer, and then along with the scissors. This just helps remove any kind of bacteria floating around there, just so I'm not introducing anything on accident. And essentially we're just going to be adding half of this bag. So this whole bag is for a 5-gallon batch. So we're just going to add half of it here. So really just eyeballing it. You can see in there. All right. Well, that feels like about half to me. Honestly, you could end up just pouring the whole thing in there. It doesn't really matter. But I think I might be trying another small batch here soon, so I'd like to save this. I could just store this in the fridge. Now really, at this point, You don't have to do anything to this. It will just sit there and it'll eventually fall down to the bottom and it'll get all absorbed. You could stir it up as well if you wanted to, but typically when I do that it sticks to a spoon. But let's go ahead and give it a try here. Now at this point, if you want to, you can stir up the yeast. You don't have to, but I'm going to show you what that looks like. So basically, I like to grab some of the wort and pour it on top and kind of get it started here. What's going to happen is when you stick your spoon in there, the yeast sticks to the spoon or it sticks to the side of the fermenter. So I try to kind of grab it and get it stirred up a little bit there, and that seems to have helped me in the past and now. So here at this point, you can agitate it a little bit. Once the beer has turned into alcohol, you don't really want to agitate it anymore, but since we are still in the early stages, you can agitate it plenty, and actually agitating it's pretty good because yeast and oxygen go well together. So just going to get this all stirred up here. There we go. Now at this point I feel like I'm just playing. So I'll go ahead and shake off my spoon there. Now put the lid on here. Now again, this was nicely sanitized, but just give it a douse real quick here just to make sure. And snap on the lid. Airlock in here. I can go ahead and grab all the pieces. So again, this is a 3-piece airlock. We've got our cylinder, we've got this piece that goes inside of it, and then the lid on the top. So this airlock has a fill line on it. You can't really see it, but when you get it, you fill it up pretty much right to the line. You drop this in over the top, and then you put the lid on. So basically this creates an airtight seal, so CO2 that's produced during fermentation can get out, but then nothing else can get in. And so we just rock that in there. Cool. That is the really simple process to prepping the beer and getting it started. We're still not done, but we've got the hard part out of the way. Now basically this just needs to sit around for 2 weeks to ferment. It needs to convert that sugar into alcohol. So if you'd like to subscribe to the channel and see some other things that I do throughout the process, such as I'm going to check this wort right here to see how much sugar is in it now, so that in 2 weeks I can check our beer that we just made to see how much of that was converted into alcohol to get our ABV. Also, I will be kegging this, so if you want to see how that's done, feel free to subscribe or just make a note to check back in the future. Again, my name is Drew. Check out some of the other videos that I got on homebrew and DIY stuff. Thanks for watching.